Today the topic is concept of justice in international relations. Now we have to understand what is international relations. This is a relation between states and non-state actors in the international scenario. Now when we are talking of justice in international relations, we'll be talking about how the actors and the non-actors are playing their field in the drama of international relations. So when we normally say every country believes that justice is the aim of its foreign policy. But at the back of foreign policy lies the concept of power, the concept of use of force, the concept of use of hegemonic force. When we are talking of justice, it is accepted as a naturally desirable goal in international relations. All states believe that there should be equality of opportunities in the international plane. Every state should have a level playing field in the international platform. However, it is very clear that in the international scenario, there are inequalities, and in this inequality situation, the power holders or the power elites are the ones who have the power to influence the behavior of the countries which are not that developed or hierarchically is in a lower position. Now, concept of justice is a problem. For example, after the Second World War, we found that the victors of war had demanded reparations. Or after Second World War, United States did not have to face the war crime tribunals even after dropping atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There have been several instances in international history where the victors have got all while the vanquished had to leave all. The concept of justice has not been actually implemented properly in history many a times. Now in mainstream international relation, the concepts of legitimacy, balance of power, balance of terror, collective security help in protecting the stability and order in the international situation, and this is done at the cost of justice. When we are talking of international relations, the main aim of the international actors are always to have order and stability. Justice can take a backseat. Now we'll be discussing how the concept of justice is different in the national and the international spheres. European democracies in the 19th century were very much influenced by the concepts of liberty, equality, fraternity, Universal Declaration of the Rights of Man, and the ideals of Magna Carta within their respective nation states. In the Cold War period, there were two superpowers, and most of the states wanted stability than to have justice. In most cases, it was seen in the name of stability and order, the small, powerless states had to face injustice. David Held has stated very clearly that there is a reluctance of democracies to extend their models of governance to international relation. And this has led to the striking paradox within the global system in which the increase in the number of democratic states has not been accompanied by a corresponding increase in democracy among states. So, most of the liberal countries, they aim at democracy in the internal relations, in the domestic politics. But when they are acting in the international plane, democracy doesn't play such important role. At that time, it is the element of power, element of force which becomes important. Ideology takes a backseat. In the garb of ideology, it is the power factor which plays most important, and it is the powerful who gets into all types of injustice against the powerless. Now, war is the most extreme manifestation of unjust international conduct, and we have seen that all throughout history, several wars have taken place and the victors have got everything. In the colonial era, most of the major wars across the world were among the European democracies, and it was initiated in the colonies of Asia and Africa. Now, today we find that the platform of wars have shifted from the European or the American countries to the countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America. Now, the location may have changed, but the gross injustice continues. And history shows that most of the wars have been conducted by democratic countries who support human rights, liberty, equality, fraternity within their country, but are not ready to give these rights to other countries. For example, we can take the case of America attacking Vietnam. The US Defense Secretary Robert McNamara had accepted that it was a colossal mistake. Now, we can say that America's colossal mistake had destructed many lives and property, and Vietnam has been facing it since a long time, and even today the impact of American war is there in Vietnam. Again, when we talk of democratic countries, we can talk of Britain and France, who have gone jointly into war against Egypt and separately against Argentina, Indochina, Iceland, and Central Africa. While democracies usually employ military power in their international relations, either in war or for deterrence purposes, non-democracies use it in their national domain as well. Now, we'll be talking about the disjunction between the sovereign state's behavior on the national plane and that on the international plane vis-a-vis justice. The science of international relations serves the policy of the power elite, and historically and existentially the power elite has little in common with the rest of the world. We have seen that there is insulation of international relations from the intellectual resources that have been provided in the human and the social sciences. In national field, the resources of Plato's concept of justice, Aristotle's concept of democracy, the Reformation, the Renaissance, the English, French and the Russian revolutions, and the American War of Independence play a very important role and have inspired the concept of justice in the national plane. The concept of justice has been also inspired and motivated by the philosophers like Locke, Bentham, Rousseau, Voltaire, Tocqueville, Jefferson, Kant, Hegel. Political scientists like John Rawls' theory of justice, economic philosopher Amartya Sen's concept of entitlement are rooted in the historical concern of justice. The traditions which are of justice in the national plane are not taken to be the model in the international plane. On the other hand, we have Machiavelli's Fox and Lion influence on statecraft, the separation of politics from ethics, Clausewitz's concept of war as diplomacy by other means, and Nietzsche's version of the Superman, which is based on Bismarck's blood and iron diplomacy. Metternich's alliance system has also been a source of inspiration for international relations. So, in this way, we find a divide where democratic concepts play a motivating place in influencing the democratic aspects of national politics. On the other hand, the use of force, the use of power is thought to be a model in international relations. Here we can talk of Morgenthau's concept of realism. the concept of power, the concept of national interest, which play a very important role. And ideology is something which can be given a backseat according to the core realists. Immanuel Kant's quote is very important here. He states that the greatest evils which affect civilized nations are brought about war, and not so much by actual wars in the past or the present as the never-ending and indeed continually increasing preparations for war. Most of the countries in international relations are continuously hoarding arms, ammunition, missiles to protect itself from future wars. This hoarding is actually impacting people because more of investment into the defense budget leads to less of investment in the development budget. And when Immanuel Kant is saying that war has been a problem, but a future war is a greater, fear of the future war is a greater problem, it needs to be given real importance. Again here we would like to say that Woodrow Wilson's 14 points and Roosevelt's liberal ideas are not that important in international relations when compared to the use of power and force. The struggle for power has been the basis for politics among nations. The military, the bureaucracy have been the vehicle of modernization. Now we see that in the post-Cold War scenario, the economic and military powers are important, but with it is coming the cultural domain also. Today, we need a looking glass image in order to see whether the major powers of the West are influencing the countries of Asia, Africa, Latin America directly or indirectly. Now we need to talk about the impact of United Nations in the international scenario in bringing about justice. United Nations in a way has been successful in the post-Second World War era because a Third World War did not take place. However, the basic difference in the membership in the Security Council leads to injustice. There has been a continuous demand for restructuring of the Security Council because some powers, the 5 powers which get more importance than the other powers. And when United Nations was created, it was just after Second World War. The scenario was different. Today, the scenario has changed. So United Nations needs to reflect the changing scenario. Another thing where we need to talk about in United Nations is that United Nations is funded by other countries and United States is a major actor which funds United Nations. Many a times through blackmailing, United States has tried to influence the behavior of United Nations. When it has failed to do so, it has unilaterally gone into implementing its own foreign policies. Other international institutions which are really important in bringing out justice or injustice in the international scenario are the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. These are the two bodies which have been delinked from the hazards of the democratic principles which are there in the UN system. The UN has survived the global power hierarchy through many ways. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are the dominant actors shaping the rules of game today. They control the nation states, the financial decisions of the nation states, and today, in order to have justice, it is very important to look into not only the political aspects, but also to look into the economic aspects. post-Cold War period, it has been found that the transnational corporations or the multinational corporations are becoming very major actors. These major actors, that is multinational companies, they have their headquarters in one country. They go and support a particular country because they have their national flag, but they are conducting business throughout the world. It's a form of neo-colonialism where the political power is with the independent, poor, developing countries of Asia, Africa or Latin America, but the economic power is no more with them. Through structural adjustment programs, it is being seen that their policies are being influenced. The global market has become a place of injustice because through neo-colonialism, the raw material and labor, cheap labor, are being provided by the erstwhile third world countries, that is the countries of Asia, Africa and Latin America. The World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are the apex funding regime. Now, when they are funding the developing countries, there are several conditions which are attached to it. And these conditions are never in favor of the developing countries. For example, these poor countries are being said to control, to limit the subsidies which are being given to the farmers. On the other hand, it has been found that American government is giving subsidy to their own farmers. Another gross way of violation of the non-state actors or multinational corporations have been seen recently is that in India, in several parts of India, it has been reported that companies like Coca-Cola, it has been using the groundwater to increase its profit basis. Ultimately, the people in the village or the farmers are failing to get drinking water, are failing to get enough water for agriculture because the groundwater has lessened. It is leading to great pollution, great environmental degradation. Though there has been a lot of opposition, but still we know Coca-Cola as a company is working in these particular areas. Moreover, the standards, the pollution standards that are followed by these multinational companies differ from country to country. In the country where they are headquartered, they have very stringent policies of pollution. Naturally, they follow those laws. But when it comes to the poor countries where the domestic government do not have the power to control them or implement the laws in a proper way, they do not follow the minimum pollution laws which are needed in order to protect the environment. Many a times it has been found that the concept of human rights is being violated in several parts of the world. In the name of development, it has been found that American or the Western hegemony continues even today in Asia, Africa, Latin America. Here we find that even on cultural aspects, influence on dress, influence of food, influence on lifestyle is taking place. And this is totally impacting the overall lifestyle of the people. There is a complex problem coming in between tradition and modernity. Many a times it has been found that in order to implement this intellectual property rights, the American or the Western European rich countries are violating the norms. Indigenous medicines which were produced in these countries are not being produced because these things have already been patented by the Western countries, and in order to do so, you need permission from these Western countries. the domestic government doesn't have enough power in order to fight with those multinational companies which have gone in for patent of these indigenous goods or products. It has also been seen that in order to have justice, many a times the human rights concepts are not given importance. In the name of protecting democracy in Iraq, American attack happened and today Iraq is in a bad position. So when we are talking of justice, it is very much necessary to think in a holistic manner and to think in a long-term manner. The world is in a situation where there is lots of unemployment, lots of poverty, and the structural adjustment programs which are taking place in many of these developing countries may lead to a group of people who do not have literacy, do not have education up to a proper level, do not have proper food, clothing or shelter. Automatically, this may lead to a form of fundamentalism or extremism. This is a nature which is happening in many parts of the world, and it is very necessary to understand that the state actors as well as the non-state actors need to be just in their international interaction. Otherwise, in order to get more of profit, in order to increase power, in order to increase the hegemonic dominance, it may lead to more of poverty, impoverishment and marginalization of the vulnerable, which in the long term may lead to greater problem of extremism, of international terrorism. In the new process of globalization, the erstwhile third world countries have been the major source of skilled manpower. India, as it is going ahead in 2016, the government is trying to develop the skilled manpower base. In the international arena, skilled manpower play a very important role in running the industries and the factories of the industrialized countries and that of the multinational companies. It is very necessary to understand whether the cheap skilled manpower will lead to proper justice because their labor is cheap. They get much less salary than those employed in the Western countries. Many a times it is thought that globalization is bringing in all negativity in the arena of international justice. But that is not true. With globalization has come in the fresh air of concepts of human rights, concepts of barring child labor and going for more of organic production. These things are benefiting the country in the long run, and when the developing countries are following the international norms, they are benefiting. In international relation, the concept of justice has been studied since a long time. There are three ways by which justice can be prevailed. Number one, restructuring of the United Nations. It is the need of the day that the membership of the Security Council needs to be restructured, and countries from developing world needs to have a place because the position has changed from post-Cold War era to the 21st century. Another thing which is very much necessary is ensuring that the enforcement of Universal Declaration of Human Rights take place, both through the United Nations and through non-governmental organizations. Human rights protection is very much needed throughout the world. The developed countries should realize that if they violate the human rights of people in the periphery countries, they will also face problem in the future. Today, the extreme level of poverty is leading to fundamentalism, is leading to terrorism, and the marginalized are becoming more marginalized. The international world needs to have a situation where justice prevails and there is no gross violation of justice in the name of human rights by the major developed countries. Another thing which can bring in greater justice in the international scenario is ensuring regional development and external funding on the basis of the Index of Human Development at the national level, with the non-governmental organizations monitoring it. It is a very positive thing that environmental protection, pro-poor activities, pro-participative development have become important today. Though the Millennium Development Goals could not attain its objective by 2015, but it has provided better life conditions to millions of people in the poor Asian, African, and Latin American countries. Globalization has brought in more of technological advancement, more of connectivity, more of communication among the developed and the developing worlds. This provides more information which can be utilized for the development.